Welcome to the video. We're going to demonstrate how RTS works and give some audio examples and try to explain as much as we can on the way. I should say that this is my RTS, so I created it with orchestra and strings in mind. You could create your own master track with your own ideas, jazz or big band or piano, whatever you like. And if you're a professional musician, you should be able to do way more than what I've done with it. I've simply created a system that helps me to learn music, to have fun, and sketch with it so then I can go and flesh out some deeper ideas of it and save presets for the sheer joy of playing it. So yes, a professional could take this way further. This is my version. Let's get going with a simple preset that I like. I'll explain on the way. We're in A minor. We're going to have the orchestra complete, playing a triad from RTS's simple chord, very low volume. The lead Bohemian violin is in exactly that, the solo lead. And let's see if it can sound decent even being fully exposed. And then we're going to add instruments. Now that was a bit loud maybe for that. Let's bring it down a little bit, kind of smooth it in there a little. But for the first test, it went pretty good. The melody is working. Now as you add more instruments, it will blend in even better and get more interesting. So let's do that. Let's turn off the mute of the bass that I've used for this preset and play it again. Yeah, I really like that. That is in an A minor, and that's just kind of testing out and sketching in that scale. Really just playing from the tonic down the scale, and the melody is giving me some interesting ideas, and it's being played at a certain tempo, but we can mess with that as we go. So that's melody B. So this melody remedy is the RTS that I use for melody. It's plugged into the, in this case, Bohemian violin at this moment. So you can see here that the input is in for the Bohemian violin. So this RTS melody is playing the Bohemian violin. And you could change it. There's many different versions I have for this particular theme because I tried out a lot of experiments. And you can also have more than one track available at a time. So you could have a bass note playing a melody above it and get even more ideas and on and on. So, but let's stay focused. We've turned on the bass. Let's now add some piano for a little bit of extra interest. See what that brings to the party. So if you want to just hear the piano, like what was that? What did you change? You brought in piano, I barely heard it. Well, I can bring it up in volume, but I'm going to solo the piano and just adjust it a little bit. And now how the velocity you play these notes, these chords, really impacts certain instruments. Most of the instruments are affected by velocity. So every time you add an instrument, as you play that chord, you're going to be able to build in excitement as those sampled instruments respond to a greater velocity. So as you add instruments, you really get that effect more. But right now, we have the solo piano just to hear what we've added. Stronger note. So you can build it as you go, in this case, as we go up the scale. So very light, medium. So you have that to play with. Not only are you controlling what you've created in time and transitions of the chords and choosing what pattern plays when and for what instrument, the velocity impacts that in a very real way, just like it's simply this. The RTS system simply binds 3 notes instead of 1. So normally if a pianist was playing a chord on the piano, a triad, he would hold down 3 notes and it would play 3 notes. In this case, we're going a step further and saying, well, I want my fingers for more than just, I want to have more control than just separate notes. I'm going a step of orchestration above that. But you still have to play it exactly like it was that piano chord, because if you missed a transition, just like if the pianist is changing chords and misses the beat, it doesn't sound good. Same thing with an RTS system. It takes practice. You have to learn your ears, but it's a lot easier than if you were to just learn piano outright. I think it's a lot more fun and you can learn a lot. But you do have to practice, and because you are inputting a chord with your finger just like you would with 3 fingers. Timing all matters. The velocity matters. That's the point of that little talk. But so we have this piano. And it's sounding good, so we're going to turn it up a tad bit more because we're kind of liking that. But let's see our player. So the RTS that's playing the piano, in this case it's probably the Fazoli, or it's the Easy Keys. So if I select Easy Keys track, I do indeed see that it's the re-MIDI piano input, and this is what it's playing. It's playing this particular piano idea, which is basically piano chords at this point, half tempo, and it's transposed 1 octave down, and the actual tracks, because Remedy can play live more than 1 track, so it can be playing a triad or a quarter note of the chord and a bass note of C1 and C2 that gives that big piano bottom end. So that's what you're hearing, and you can tailor everything as what you want, or you can have it play something really interesting from a converted Easy Keys. You can take your Easy Keys performances and translate it to your own chords and play it in an RTS if you want to go that route. Or in this case, I just created simple piano melodies and backing tracks with bass. So very simple. It can be as simple as you want or as complex as you want. If you were a really great piano player, you could just go crazy with this, because you could literally input all kinds of great little piano motifs, but you could put it in a system like this and have it forever and call upon it whenever you need for any kind of scale or chords. It's just that flexible. So this piano I like, and it has a little rhythm because it's playing quarter notes. So let's add to that. So we have that. I'll unsolo that. So we got our bass, we got our piano. We're going to add a couple thickening strings here. So I'll unmute strings that are basically just thickening up the overall thing, idea. And let's listen. So So the last note, I was a little gentler on the last two notes there because you can bring it down in temp or in the amount of velocity. So now let's add, we could try adding a guitar. I don't know if it's just going to muddy things up or not, but let's solo. Let's listen to that guitar, the ample guitar in this case, if it's going to add something we want or not, but we'll play it and listen. I'll bring it up on the meter. So it's playing just these kind of strokes, these chords. It's not adding any motion, but we're going to try it because experiment is what this is all about. We'll unsolo and it does add something. I'll just leave it in there. You can hear the strings played in a certain way, and it will peak out according to different patterns and different timing. So it's something there that might show itself to be interesting at certain ways you play on the keyboard and certain scales. So, and at any time I can just mute it. Now the last one I'm going to unmute is what I call kind of the secondary solo violinist walking up to the first group, and as the lead soloist is playing, he's going to come in and try to blend in and add something. That's how I see the second melody player coming in. So he does have his own melody, his own RTS player, so that I can, and it's plugged into the emotional violin, so you can see that's plugged into melody 2, and that's exactly what we have here, melody 2. Now in this case, it's playing the exact same theme, which is melody B, as you can see here, but we can mess with it a little bit. We can shift it in time by half a beat or a full beat and mess with things, but we're going to start off very safe and simple. It's at the same tempo, I believe, but we can mess with that too. And we transposed it down so that it's not going to take the lead. It's going to just add to it. So again, play the same theme. So you could take it further and tell that player, kind of as an example, you could tell him to, no, play some counter melody, mix it up a little bit, and he might come back to you and say, well, should I play a different theme but in the scale and see what happens there? And then the conductor might say, yes, give it a try. Now, let's see what happens. It may be too bizarre, it may work. So the last note, I kind of missed up the timing there, but now, yeah, you can tell that you were able to come in here, bring in a separate soloist and a different sample library, have it kind of conform to the space because we put all our instruments through a bus. We generally, or I generally, turn down the local reverb or space in a lot of these VSTIs so that when it goes to the bus that takes all these instruments and puts them through a space so that they all sound more like they were actually recorded in a similar space. It's not perfect, but it's a very fast way to take libraries recorded in different spaces to give them their own little space, so to speak. So that's another little tip. and I'll get more into that whole setup later if anybody wants to know about it. But it's quite a simple idea. But that helps you deal with, so many different libraries, brings them into kind of a space where you can work with them and add them to your ideas. So right now, we've heard the same theme over and over, and you're probably so tired of hearing that. But the great thing is we've created a nice little musical group here. Let's start to use the power of RTS and say, well, that was all in A minor, played very specifically down the scale. Let's start, instead of on the tonic, let's begin to mix it up and say, I'm going to start on the 5th degree of the A minor scale and see what we get now. In fact, before we do that, I'm going to switch this back just so that it doesn't get too confusing. I'm going to bring it down a little bit, because when you start to experiment, you don't want to change too many things right from the get-go. And then once you find a place that's really working, an idea, then you can start to really move things around. Let's, from the 5th again. That transition was iffy, but so instead of ending it the normal way, I took a chance of trying a different chord, but it didn't work. So let's try that again, but try something else. So yeah, different things going on here. So I'm going to rethink it and now, sometimes when you're moving over the keyboard and it does change and all the patterns change, so your ears have to readjust, especially if you've been in one scale for a long time. So what I do as a little trick is I find something that's working and then I start to move away from it and grow the idea. So right now I found some harmony that I like in this chord transition. I'm going to try to mess with it and build it. Not bad, a new idea, but let's try it again. And I am finding the guitar to be a little bit off speed. So what I'm going to do is just mute the guitar so that I can build up a new musical idea quicker. So that was still in the A minor, but moving from the in the other direction, different melody patterns, and again, something to work with there. I don't like it as much as my first idea. So let's go back just to show how versatile this can be, or just how you can change things and even though you've been working on it for quite a while, you can actually change it up quite a bit and take a whole fresh look at it. Let's go to twice as fast tempo inside just the melody and play that again and see what we get. So it's much faster in its little melodic idea, so let's try to work with that. So the ending note, now I missed some transitions there that needed to be quantized, but it was a fresh look at that familiar little motif we had. It was done faster and it added more notes, especially the last note. So again, yeah, a different way to hear it. So that was interesting. An experiment. Let's go to C major. A whole new scale. What will we find? Who knows? So the first 4 chords there, kind of interesting. I'm going to hopefully make the transitions better. Second time hearing it always is better. But not that time. Let's again. So that note was pretty radical, but still in the scale, but it was one of those notes that I would probably adjust or leave it if you want to do some radical stuff and changes. But the idea here is that we switched from the A minor to the C major, and we're already starting to get ideas and adjust our timing to those new patterns. So a couple of those transitions were really nice. I could work with that. And the tonic of the C major, the next step up is that really high note, but it works when you start with the tonic. So, sorry, it was the third note up. But it worked in that case. So if you're going backwards in the scale, it didn't work, but forwards it did. So it's just how you approach it, what tempo, what you have in mind. It just plays such a role. And so before this video goes on for 3 hours, let's quickly change the entire theme and start to play something different. Again with the C major, and then we'll mix it up. We'll get cold and dark. But let's start again, but we changed the melodic phrase and so again, something new. I like that. I can work with that, get the timing better, but it's a new melodic idea. Now let's stay with this track, this Melody 1 Bohemian. Let's take it to a D harmonic minor and see what we get, because it's going to have a different pattern or a different melody, but it'll be in D harmonic minor. So there's definitely something there, but I would have to make some adjustments to the notes. And the way I would do that is I would record that entire sequence that I just did. It would record onto the remedy track of that controller, so that in that case I believe it would be Melody 1. I would hit record and play that. And as that records, then it's not going to record the phrases. That will be recorded down here if you enable record to the actual violin, the Bohemian. It will record the actual samples, MIDI of the samples, not the audio, but then you could bounce it to audio and mix it like an actual audio track. But what I'm saying here is it will record my performance of the keys that I hit on the keyboard. So there'll literally only be 1 or 2 notes, but that can be quantized so you hit your transitions dead on. So your timing is perfect. And then once that's done, very simple to do, you record it, click on the MIDI, quantize those 2 or 3 notes, boom, and then you go down to the actual MIDI notes of the pattern, which will be more notes, and you'll be able to see that, oh yeah, that note was too high, I needed to bring it down, and you edit that, and then you have that musical idea. So again, long story short is it's very simple to capture ideas and edit your mistakes. The actual keyboard is set up for very experimental sketching of raw ideas, and that's what it does so well. So we just went to some very dark melodies in the D harmonic minor. Let's change it up and just see how it changes again when we get to melody B. So I missed that transition, but wow, it's a whole different ball game here. The last couple chords, very interesting, and if I repeat it or hold it down longer, you'll get even more. So let's just take this interesting line here and just hold it right down to the end. So in that case, I just let it play out to, depending on the speed we're at. So that actually played for 16 beats there. I held down that one melodic idea. And then switch over back to the tonic of the D harmonic. I should have hit it harder though. So, but then I could say to myself, no, I don't want to play that entire 16 beats. I'm going to play that same little musical idea, but I'm going to change it after just 2 or 3 beats, or when I faster, basically. So what I'm saying again is that they're versatile. You could say to yourself, well, that note should have been a little bit longer or whatever, but again, you can edit that. But how you make your transitions, how hard you press the key, what timing you're playing it with, and the articulation playing, it all plays a role in what you're going to get. And since you can actually stack up and add extra, you could have not 2 melodies, but you could have something simple like a bass line for the violin, or you can stack. You don't have to just have one track working at one time. So a great thing about the player is you can have multiple stacked motions or melodies, depending on if the instrument can handle that, if the articulation is fast enough. Very versatile. So enough for this video. The ending part is going to be playing all these ideas that I've come up with when I was creating the system or testing the system. So let's just go down here. And I want to show you some older audio clips that were created as I played the keys, found something I liked, totally raw, and then said, hey, that's cool. I'm going to save it as a preset and work on it later. And that's the great thing about this system. It allows you to do it so quick. Even if you don't record it in your DAW, right? You simply have it as a preset. I was playing these, adding players and instruments, not recording anything inside the project, the Cubase project. Just simply hit my master bus on record, recorded these MP3s in the raw, no mixing, and said, okay, I'm going to name it something appropriate, save the whole thing as a preset. When you reload it, all your patterns, all your instruments, it's exactly if you just had like a Korg arranger keyboard or a Genos. It's all recalled. You just start playing and you can start fleshing out that original idea. So with that in mind, let's grab one of these, put it on solo, and play some of these initial ideas I had when I was coming up and testing this. And these are some of them from years ago, but I captured them to remember when I first began to see how this thing is working. And so I'll have a few comments on each one, but let's just go through them, and it gives you more examples of what you can do with this system. So what we have here is simply something big like Opus or the orchestra, probably one of their big presets, and I wanted to add to it, and that's what RTS does so well. You can take these great presets from Opus and the orchestra and anything like that, and add to it and build onto it and say, no, I want some really interesting complex strings battling out on top of that big orchestra sound. And that's exactly what I just captured there. So let's go to the next one, and I'll explain what that is, if I remember. Custom RTS violin. Let's listen. So what's good about this one is, again, recorded raw, and some of the instruments should be delayed, and there's timing issues. That's not the point. The point is you record interesting experiments of music, you save it so that you can go back and make it right, but you've captured that idea. You've sketched out an idea, saved it as a preset. It's the whole goal of RTS as far as I'm concerned. Others can do other things with it, but that's what I love about it. So that was an idea where I had some big orchestra things going. Again, I wanted a very interesting melodic and moving string line, and I did that the same way it's here. I had some kind of melody lines that were playing, and I think it captured a great idea that I want to go back to at some point. So we'll go to the next one, to the beginning. This one is Dream Acoustic Guitar. This one's a little bit different in the fact that when I was first starting with this, I said to myself, well, great, it does bombastic big orchestra, and that hides a lot of mistakes and errors and timing issues. But you get this big sound, and you get you get a lot of joy out of hearing it and instant gratification. But how does it work with very exposed lead instruments that are right out there? Can it handle that and the transitions, and what would that be like? And this is one of the first experiments where I began to realize that, yeah, you could definitely use this for solo instruments as long as you go back and fix the timing. And sometimes you get the transitions really quite good. But this is one of the first things I captured and realized that, yeah, it could be used for really any type of situation. So I wanted to just show that was one of the first times I realized that, again, it's quite flexible and you could go back and fix all the issues. But I thought that was a nice example of just really exposed instruments and voice. Let's go back to, again, this system is great for patterns, chopping up patterns live on the keyboard, because you are pushing down keys which start and stop patterns. And if you transition to a different chord in the middle of a pattern, in essence, what you're doing is you're cutting that, let's say, pattern in half or in a quarter, and you're mixing it with the next pattern on the next chord, and you've just created a brand new pattern. And that's how it works, and that's why you get so much variation. Now, this is a great example of those short note patterns going crazy to a level where it's on the very edge of going out of control, but it's still in control musically. So complex, and you're getting these fighting strings, and I thought it was worth a save, so I did. So, example of taking things to the cutting edge. I mean, the whole purpose again is to experiment and push the envelope. This is another example of strings, but icy cold, and just a different example of what you can do. So I think this kind of shows off well what you can do with a chord. Like the strings are changing and the chords that you choose, and I didn't even touch on chords in this video, but one of the most beautiful things about an RTS system is, of course, you do not have to just change the tempo in that, and you don't have to have a triad, but you can chop up your triad into separate notes, which I have down here somewhere. Top note. So if I clear everything, you can see that my triad, I've got each note of the triad on a separate track, which I can turn on, and now it will play as a triad. But if I want to take that top note and just use that and put it on a separate instrument and maybe push it up and transpose it into something more interesting, you can see that you're dealing with now harmony in a way that's going to start taking it in different places. And that's why it's so flexible, because everything I do is done in a way where you can break it up and then reassemble it in whatever way you want. Another example is I could just say, okay, instead of the triad, which this would be the triad, but I have one track as a triad, open and closed. But I could say, no, take out, do not play the mid note, and now I have a parallel fifth, right? And then you could say, that's going to be kind of colder and harsher. But then I could say, well, let's warm it up with a bass note. And you could say, well, let's play a cello with this as a chord. So it's a C2 cello leveled. So now it's a parallel fifth, but it's got a cello or a note in the C2 for a cello or something. So you're still playing the chord, but you've reshaped it into something totally different. Then I could clear that, and I could say, okay, I want an inversion of an open chord. I've got those options, broken chords, different options of chordal patterns and rhythmic patterns for chords, and a whole bunch of different inversions and pedal notes. One of the greatest things is you could have an open chord. So let's take here an open triad. And I could say, no, I want to add on to that a walking pedal note. Now you see this note that just appeared up here? That's a pedal note that's in the chord, but it's going to walk with my transitions. So it's going to add this glassiness if you have it assigned to strings. Very high glassy string, great for a harmonic string articulation. But then if you want to get and start playing it in harmonic D minor and get really dark and cold with it, super icy, you could say, no, I don't want that to walk. I don't want that pedal note to walk. I just want to have a pedal note that sustains across chord transitions. And then you get that extra kind of scary where, oh, the high note isn't following the correct path. And so it really works great, and hopefully I'll be showing this off, but this takes a lot of time to demonstrate. But I wanted to show the chords so that, remember, when I was saying you're building your master track and those triads, it ends up being every possible configuration of those triads, including big, fat, open 5, 6, 7 note triads, which isn't a triad anymore. It would be whatever that is. Very flexible, and that's the chord system. Quickly, let's just go through some of these because the video is dragging on, but I wanted to show so many different things you can do with this, but it does take time. So I recorded this because I thought the melody was really neat, and that melody happened by accident. You could do every melody while hearing the instrument, and sometimes I'll do that, but often, as long as you stick to very musical rules, you will come up with something, and I call this Life of a Gypsy because it had a very gypsy sound to it for whatever reason. But when I was playing this theme, this melody, as I changed chords, it came up with this very unique melody, and I said, yeah, record that. That's a great idea for the future. Let's keep going. You get a lot of happy accidents. So what this is RTS and Opus. And again, a great example of, I had this Opus, I forget what it was, Hollywood Adventure or whatever the preset was, and it's just beautiful. I love Opus. But I was able to add, I don't know, quite a few tracks of RTS to it, and it was just over the top and really sounding big. And I said, well, how much is RTS contributing to this original? And so I turned off the RTS, and I was left with just half of what was there. And I saved it because it really impressed upon me how RTS loves these big opus and orchestra presets and has the ability to just expand on it and put it over the edge, over the top. At least from my point of view, I really liked what it did there. So I saved it. Now, let's go to the next one, another strings test, probably a short test. Again, a crazy fast string movement here on the edge of exploding, but it's crazily almost musical. Well, to me it is musical. And it just takes regular ostinatos and said, no, I'm not going at 50 miles an hour. I'm going at 350 miles an hour. And it's going to be something of its own. And that's those runs and ostinatos that you create. And half the time you'll end up taking something from like a rapid composer or something, but just turbocharging it and hand placing all those notes. You get the initial idea of a general ostinato and then just go crazy with it. Put it in one short violin instrument, have it shifted and counter melody against another track, and you end up with these dueling, fast, short articulations just going at it, and it just shows the power of the short movement you can build up, and have so many different examples of that. Okay. Synchronous solo string. Let's see what this is. I think it's again. Again, crazy strings on the edge of exploding, but I thought it was interesting. Next one is a bigger, more orchestration here. I called it the Tribe in harmonic D, so you know it's going to be kind of on the dark side. Okay, so another example of just the many that you can like, save as a preset, and move on. You end up having hundreds of presets that, again, it can be just like an arranger keyboard, and it's so great because you literally pick up exactly where you left off. You don't have to open anything, set any settings. I should say, though, that with Divisimate 2, as I stated in my video, now it's inside the DAW. It doesn't save with your DAW project as far as I could tell. So you do have to save it in Divisimate, name it a similar thing as your project. Then when you recall that, if you're using Divisimate inside your RTS, and you can use RTS with Divisimate, you have to save two things. So needed to be said. Now this is one of the greatest, craziest experiments off the hook. I was, getting RTS to work with TuneTrack and with UJam, and I solved a lot of issues with getting performances from easy keys, but the sustain information on the pedal was not transferring with the MIDI file. And then I figured out that, well, you can draw in sustain with all the notes. I'll show you how to do that. And it works really well if though you had the sustain information. But I was trying all that stuff and saying, wow, I can get almost anything to work. And literally almost every VSTI I have, how great would it be if you could get the session players of the real tracks from Band in the Box to be part of RTS? I had to try it. And I did try it. This is one of the first crazy experiments where I realized that it's possible, but if the company realized how close they're making it to be smooth and really workable, they might offer a version of real-time real tracks, which would be great. Here's an example of one of the first tests when I cut up because in Band in the Box, you cannot play it live on a keyboard. If you have it, you know that. That's craziness. But if you cut it up, well, I should say that if you have your master track, which is a bunch of progressions, chords, Band in the Box loves chords, but you have to write them in, and then it processes everything and it spits out a finished audio file. Okay, so there's no way you're going to play that live on a keyboard. You would have to chop it up, assign it to some kind of sampler, which can play those MIDI files according to a remedy. Without getting too technical, it can be done. It takes work, but it definitely can be done. This is one of the first tests where I realized that, wow, bass and drums was working really well. The transitions worked really good. With a little bit of quantize, you wouldn't know that it wasn't a VSTI or something, but it would have a whole lot more human feel. And then I decided to go for it, and I said, well, let's do that with pitch bent electric guitars, maybe the hardest thing to do in MIDI. I don't know if it's even possible now, but very hard to take real players pitch bending their guitars and play it on a keyboard. But this test, flawed as it is, I was amazed at how close you can get, and in some cases totally believable as I'm playing the chords, which are playing the instruments live on the keyboard according to what chords I want to play. So here's a short snippet of that crazy experiment. So yeah, I thought very interesting to hear. And if you have any vision, some people might say that's crazy, why even bother? But somebody's going to do it. Some company's going to say, yeah, we're going to create those transitions from the get-go, but we're going to do it smoother so that when we get to the stage of cutting it up, it's going to be done in a way more musical way, smooth way. And then we're going to offer real-time, real players, and people love it because I think it has crazy potential. So I wanted to at least show the first experiments with that. One final one, just another, idea that I recorded and said, hey, that's interesting. So there you have it, a bunch of ideas from my past. These are all years old, but it's kind of a history of, creating the system, recording some interesting events. And then it's progressed to the point where, it's really a system where you can get raw ideas, edit them slightly, bounce them down to audio, have fun with it. You can play for hours on the keyboard and your ears will perk up and you'll get some gratification. And then later you can smooth it out, you can mix it, fix all the issues. Very fun to play. That's my point of view. You may have another point of view, but that's what I wanted to share today. For those who've watched the channel regularly, I assume and hope that there's at least a couple of you that played this video to the end. And if you have watched it to the end, I applaud your support. And I do say thank you for those who help financially. There's a couple people that have done that for years. I don't know if I've ever recognized that often, but it is appreciated. And anybody who comments and says, hey, I'm glad you're experimenting, I appreciate that too, because companies need a push and a shove sometimes, and we need to be out there experimenting and say, hey, why don't you do this? We got enough of the bread and butter. Let's do something more radical, and this is part of doing something experimental. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're able to play music this week, and we'll see you on the next one.